I get that. Something tripped with Peter that he recognized this Jesus was something far more. And he writes it in this. Well, that's just the introductory comments. We got to erase through the rest of this because Peter actually gives us two big lessons to prove this overall point that God has given us everything that we need. And so the first lesson is this. The first lesson is we have everything we need for life and godliness. Let's look at verses 3 through 4. I'll read it to you. Peter says, His divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness through our knowledge of Him who called us by His own glory and goodness. Through these He has given us His very great and precious promises, so that through them you may participate in the divine nature and escape the corruption in the world caused by evil desires. I'm going to explain this, unpack this to us a little bit because it's complicated. I get it. It's a very complicated passage right here. There's a lot of throughs and stuff working on, so we're going to diagram it in just a little bit. But before we get there, I just wanted to recognize something to you. Peter says, His divine power has given us everything we need for life and for godliness. I'll go ahead and put that up here on this diagram. His divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness. I'm going to unpack that just a little bit. I've met people who think that life and godliness are at odds with each other. You know, if you want to have a real life, you can't be godly all the time. I mean, come on. If you want to really live it up, there got to be some things in your life where you're not, totally, spiritual and stuff. I've heard people say that. And then on the other hand, I've heard people say, well, those godly people, they don't have a life. All they ever do, they go to church, and they go to Bible studies, and they go to committee meetings, and they read their Bible. And it's like, life and godliness seem to be at odds with each other. But here there's a promise that God makes us. The promise is that God's power has given us everything we need for both, for life and for godliness. But it comes through something. You see that in your passage? Take a look at that. Life and godliness. God's power comes to us through the knowledge of Jesus. You might want to change your arrow there if you're drawing the diagram with me. It comes through the knowledge of Jesus. The word used for knowledge here is the Greek word epignosko. And epignosko means a deep personal awareness. Like, I know that 2 plus 2 is 4, and I'm completely convinced that 2 times 2 is 4, and I love the fact that 2 to the second power is 4. I know that stuff. I'm cool with that stuff. But that's just like factual information. I don't know it deeply. I've never met a 2. I've never spent time with a 2 and really gotten to know how he feels about life. I've never done that because, I can't. But epignosko is a word that refers to a deep personal connection. In fact, Jesus in Matthew at one point said, "No one knows the Father except the Son." And he used this word, epignosko. The knowledge of Jesus. Friends, what Peter is telling us is that if you want to have divine power at work in your life, it comes through knowing Jesus. Deeply, personally, directly. Without that knowledge of Jesus, this promise collapses. The knowledge of Jesus. A couple other quick things I'll just mention about that. It says, the knowledge of Jesus, and then take a look at this again, who called us by His own glory and goodness. It's not just that we know Jesus, but it's that we know He chose us. He saw something special in us, and He chose us. But there's another through here. Go on to verse 4, and you see there's another through. Through these. Well, what are the these? The these are referring to Jesus' glory and goodness. Do you see that? It says, through these, look back a little bit, by His own glory and goodness, through these, He has given us great and precious promises. So here's the next one. The great and precious promises come through the knowledge of Jesus, His glory and goodness. And then let's keep going. It says, so that through them you may participate in the divine nature divine nature, that sounds a lot like godliness, and escape the corruption in this world caused by evil desires. Another word for corruption is rot or decay. That sounds like if you're escaping rot and decay, you have life. So, in other words, this life and godliness is paralleled by this concept to become more like Jesus, to participate in the divine, and to escape the corruption in this world. This is something that I didn't realize until I put this diagram together. But I just want to open your eyes to it. Everything we need is directly parallel to God's promises. You see that? Everything that we need is directly parallel to God's promises. He has given us everything we need. He has made promises to us. You know what that means? The only thing left for us is to live it, to put it into practice, to actually do it. So, just a couple quick blanks. I can't belabor this point too much. I mean, I think this is essential for us to grasp. And I've met a lot of Christians who have not understood this. And so it's very important to me that we get it. It's very simple. 3 simple bullet points on the back side of your note sheet. It goes like this. Becoming like Jesus comes about, first of all, it comes from God's power. Secondly, it comes through the knowledge of Jesus. And then it comes into our lives as godly holiness. Becoming like Jesus comes from God's own power through the knowledge of Jesus into our lives as God's godly holiness. And so I got to ask you this question. Do you have God's power at work in your life? If you don't have God's power at work in your life, there's an easy way to get it through the knowledge of Jesus. By giving your heart to Jesus, you gain access to everything God's got. All His power can come into your life. If you have given your heart to Jesus, claim it. If you haven't given your heart to Jesus, recognize how awesome this would be. God is committed to giving us everything we need to become like Jesus, but it doesn't mean we can just sit back and wait for the magic to happen. There's something Peter tells us we need to do. Go ahead and look at verses 5 through 9. 2 Peter, verses 5 through 9. It says, "For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness,